Is there a footnote that I missed
There's
somewhere?
no constitutional right to a student visa.
So, but is there
Student visa is
a constitutional right? Does it say somewhere that Marco Rubio gets to determine which speech is appropriate and revoke student visas based on what you think constitutes free speech?
There's a statute that says the Secretary of State gets to determine whether...
A graduate student publishes an op-ed. Weeks later, masked agents detain her on the street. In a fiery hearing, Representative Pramila Jayapal confronted Secretary Marco Rubio and declared, "Do not tell me it is not your job." Stay with us, because this exchange goes to the heart of free speech and executive power in America.
Representative Jayapal.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary Rubio, for being here. On March 21st, 2025, the State Department approved the revocation of a student visa for Remeza Öztürk, a Turkish citizen who is a graduate student at Tufts University, apparently simply for writing an op-ed. According to an internal State Department memo, you took this action under your discretionary authority to revoke visas, and soon after you revoked her visa, armed and masked plainclothes officers snatched Ms. Öztürk off the street and transported her to a prison in Louisiana. Mr. Secretary, do you really think that Ms. Öztürk's op-ed results in a foreign policy consequence for the United States?
I believe that case involves someone whose visa we never would have granted had we known ahead of time.
I'm not asking you that question. I'm asking you if you think an op-ed, but that's exactly, in fact, what happened. The State Department wrote a memo concluding that you did not have sufficient grounds to revoke Ms. Öztürk's visa. There was no evidence showing that she'd engaged in any activities that were a threat to national security. And in fact, in May, a federal court ordered Ms. Öztürk's release from detention, noting that the sole basis for the government's detention appeared to be the fact that she co-authored this opinion piece in the Tufts newspaper in March of 2024. Where in the Constitution does it say that the Secretary of State can override the First Amendment protections of free speech? Is there a footnote that I missed somewhere?
There's no constitutional right to a student visa.
So, but is there a constitutional right? Does it say somewhere that Marco Rubio gets to determine which speech is appropriate and revoke student visas based on what you think constitutes free speech?
There's a statute that says the Secretary of State gets to determine whether someone is a threat. We deny visas every day all over the world.
Do you think that the Immigration and Nationality Act trumps the Constitution of the United States, Mr. Secretary?
Well, Congress can always change the law if you want, but I'm telling you,
Mr.
in the meanwhile, I have the authority, I will continue to revoke the visas of these people that come here to tear this country apart.
You said that, Mr. Secretary. Let me reclaim my time, because you are talking about revoking student visas based on what somebody says. And that means that you are trumping the legal Supreme Court, the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution of the United States.
No one has a right to a student visa.
Mr. Rubio, why did the administration need to use masked, armed, unidentified agents to whisk somebody off the street and deny her counsel for almost 24 hours after her arrest?
Well, you'll have to ask the agencies that did that work. I'm not responsible for that. I'm responsible for revoking the visas of these people that come to tear this country apart.
Secretary Rubio, I'm talking about this particular case where you revoked the student visa of a Turkish citizen who was a graduate student who wrote an op-ed that you didn't like. And suddenly you allowed for masked men to whisk her off the street. And you have multiple jobs, apparently. You're the national security advisor as well. So don't tell me it's not your job who snatches her off the street.
We don't do the snatching, but I can tell you we do the visa revocations.
Let me ask you about the national security consequences of masked men on the streets snatching people off the streets. If these are legitimate law enforcement agents carrying out proper arrests, why are they hiding their identities?
Because then radical crazies will try to hurt them.
So you think that U.S. agents who have almost always gone without face coverings, even when they're arresting some of the country's most dangerous criminals, suddenly have so much to fear from a graduate student who wrote an op-ed that they need to be masked? Is that
that law student was a guest in the United States on a student visa. No one's entitled to a student visa.
So you revoked her student visa based on an op-ed which trumps the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution.
Someone's coming up here to stir up problems on our campus. We're going to revoke their visa.
She didn't do any of that. She wrote an op-ed.
Well,
She
that's
wrote
what
an
you
op-ed,
claim.
and I'm talking to you about her
That's her
particular
lawyer's
case.
claims and your claims. Those are not the facts.
You reclaiming my time. You revoked her student visa
Yes,
because
proudly.
she wrote an op-ed.
And
Would
we'll do
you
more. We're
revoke?
gonna do more of
I
them.
have another question for you. Would you revoke the visa of someone in the United States who published claims that, quote, Jews are an untrustworthy and dangerous group? Yes or no?
We will revoke the visa of anyone who's in this country as a guest
Are
who's
you
here to stir up
going to
trouble.
revoke the visa of somebody who made
Send me
that?
the case,
that,
I'll look at it.
that
I'm looking
statement?
to
Well,
get crazy people out of
actually,
our
it's not
country.
just about revoking.
Forward
You
to
actually,
revoking the visas
Secretary
of any
Rubio,
lunatics you
excuse
can
me,
identify.
reclaiming my time. Can you explain to me why the Trump administration granted refugee status to Charles Kleinhaus, the white Afrikaner who tweeted that exact statement that I just said? There's the case.
That's not a visa.
You granted that person
That's
to
a
enter the
totally
United
different process.
States.
That's someone that applied here through a totally different process.
Secretary Rubio,
student visas are a privilege.
Secretary
we deny
Rubio,
them all the time, and
you
we'll revoke them.
revoked
And
a visa based on an op-ed, and then you allowed for
Gentlelady's time
masked
has
men
expired.
to
That's your
snatch
claim. That's
somebody off
accurate. That's
the
your claim.
street.
Your time
That's your
has
claim.
expired.
That's your claim. That's not accurate.
Recognized ranking.
The confrontation centered on the revocation of a Turkish graduate student's visa after she co-authored an opinion piece. Jayapal argued that an internal memo found insufficient grounds to label her a national security threat and pointed to a federal court order that questioned the basis for her detention. She pressed Rubio on whether immigration law can override First Amendment protections, asking where in the Constitution the Secretary of State gains authority to effectively punish speech. Rubio pushed back firmly. He argued there is no constitutional right to a student visa and said the Immigration and Nationality Act grants the Secretary discretion to deny or revoke visas if an individual is deemed a threat. In his view, visas are privileges extended to foreign nationals, not guarantees. He also distanced himself from the arrest tactics, saying enforcement actions are handled by separate agencies, while maintaining that revocations tied to security concerns fall squarely within the law. His authority. The deeper issue here is a constitutional gray area. Non-citizens inside the United States do have certain constitutional protections, including free speech. But immigration law also grants the executive branch broad discretion over who may enter or remain in the country. Courts have historically deferred to the executive in visa matters. Yet this case raises the question of whether speech alone can justify revocation without crossing into viewpoint discrimination. Beyond the legal debate, there is a human dimension. For international students, uncertainty about visa status can carry life-altering consequences. For lawmakers, the stakes are equally high, balancing campus unrest, national security, and constitutional freedoms. This clash is about more than one student. It is about where America draws the line between protecting the nation and protecting speech. Subscribe for continued updates and share your thoughts on how that balance should be struck.